Welcome back, everyone. A lot has been said about the suspension of Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, Ngozi Ojo as governor and deputy governor of Rivers State, as well as members of the Rivers State House of Assembly by President Bola Tinubu upon his declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State due to insecurity and a prolonged political instability. Be that as it may, today Rivers State is under the leadership of an administrator, Vice Admiral Ibok Ete Ibas, retired, who has pledged to work with the people of Rivers State to restore peace and order. The administrator has hit the ground running with the release of allocations from the Federation accounts to the state. He has also been holding meetings and consultation forums with stakeholders in Rivers State. But with the unanimous ratification of the state of emergency in Rivers by the National Assembly, has the last been heard on this matter. Tonight we'll take another look at the political and legal dimension to emergency rule, the powers of the president as the commander-in-chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and as a politician. Felix Moka, spokesperson of the APC, joins me now virtually to speak on this matter. Good evening to you, Barrister Moka. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, with more support coming in for Mr. President's decision, it looks like even those who were outrightly against this decision have started to have a rethink. Over the weekend, many Nigerians, with the fact that no responsible government will allow a situation to deteriorate before taking decisive action. And for the APC, you, on behalf of your party, commended the opposition caucus of the National Assembly for being on the same page with the APC legislators. Were you skeptical that the president was not going to get this overwhelming support?
The audio is not very good.
Moka, did you get that question?
No, I didn't get it clearly. The last part of your question, I didn't get that.
Were you skeptical that the president was not going to get this overwhelming support?
No, we were not skeptical at all. We were very confident that the president had made the right decision, had made the right call as far as Rivers State is concerned. You know, all of us, all Nigerians were witnesses to the events that had transpired in Rivers State over the last nearly 15 months. And any right-thinking Nigerian, I think, had to wonder, what the end game was for Governor Fubara in the manner in which he had completely, literally abolished the legislature. Not just sidelined them, but destroyed the very complex that housed the legislature of Rivers State. And in their place, had gone ahead to appoint a three-man legislature of his own. Now, let's be clear. Under the constitution of our country, a governor has no powers to appoint his own legislature. The legislature, like the office of the governor, is elected by the citizens, by voters, who vote during the general elections in our country. They are the ones who confer the authority of the legislature to the individuals who are chosen amongst the citizens of the state to be members of the legislature, given the authority under the constitution to make laws for the governance of the state. But the governor ignored all that and decided to appoint his own three-man legislature, not even meeting the minimum standards prescribed by the constitution. So the moment that was done, there was a crisis in Rivers State, and that crisis prevailed for nearly 15 months until the president intervened. Now, the president, under the constitution, has the authority in his responsible assessment, his assessment of the risk presented to the Federal Republic of Nigeria to make a decision to declare a state of emergency, as he did in Rivers State. Because the crisis which had been prevailing had boiled to a point where there was now clear and present danger and threat to not just the lives and property of people in Rivers State, but also to the national assets that were located in Rivers State. You see, all of the controversy we are seeing since the proclamation was issued by the president, if this president had withheld action, had tarried, and didn't act, in the timely manner that he did, and things had spun out of control, these critics who are busy, speaking today, we hold the president accountable and blame him for not acting sooner. Now, the president has intervened at the nick of time to avert what was threatening to be a disastrous, outcome in Rivers State that would have completely crippled our oil production capacity and sent Nigeria back to, ground zero as far as oil export is concerned, which is the mainstay of our economy. They will still blame the president for not doing anything in time. So you see, look, maybe for them there's no winning, formula here. But the president is the president of the Federal Republic. He has acted responsibly and in accordance with the Constitution to intervene to stave off this, ominous prospect of, a descent into anarchy in Rivers State. And I think that every right-thinking Nigerian supports that position. So do we at the All Progressives Congress.
Maybe you should also speak to the legal dimension to emerge to this conversation. Did you get that, Barrister Moka?
Say that again. The audio is not very good.
Did you get that, Barrister Moka? Because we're evaluating both the political and legal dimension to this conversation. I mean, with the submission you just rendered now, it sounded like the political dimension, which we would go into in the next few minutes. But I want you to speak to the legal dimension to this conversation, because I continue to wonder why legal practitioners are divided on this matter.
Now, legally speaking, look, the Constitution is very clear. The Constitution confers authority on the President of the Federal Republic to make an assessment of threats to the peace and security of Nigeria. We're not in a situation of war, obviously, but, there are other conditions laid down by Section 305 that, give the President ample authority to make a decision as to whether or not he believes that there is, serious threat to the peace and security and, for that matter, law and order, either in the entire country or in any constituent state of Nigeria. And in Rivers State, the president determined, and correctly so, that, first of all, that for 15 months, there had not been government in the state of Rivers. And not only that, the Supreme Court itself, which is the highest court of our land, confirmed that for that, long, Rivers State had not had a functional government because of the actions of the governor of Rivers State, Governor Fubara, in, as I said earlier, in completely, destroying the legislature, sidelining the members, freezing their allocation, making it impossible for them to carry on the business of lawmaking in Rivers State. Whereas, as governor, he continued unlawfully, unconstitutionally, to him to govern without a valid legislature. Now, look, you don't have to be a politician or anyone in government. It is elementary civics, elementary knowledge that our democracy, envisages, provides for, three arms of government. The governor, at the level of the state, the House of Assembly, and the judiciary. Now, each one of these arm of government is a separate arm of government, empowered under the Constitution to, function in accordance with their constitutional mandate. The legislature is the lawmaking body. That's the House of Assembly in the state. But this governor completely, nullified the authority of the legislature, sacked them, and in their place put in a puppet legislature.
All right.
That was the origin of the problem, and I think we need to get that straight. So the president simply intervened to, restore order, to restore normalcy, to restore, proper functioning of a government in Rivers State,
so
which Governor Fubara had completely upset.
Right, Barrister Moka, would you say it is sheer dishonesty when people say militants blowing the Trans-Niger pipeline, which is one of the country's highest producing crude oil pipelines, and which reportedly fetches around $40 million daily at current prices, is not enough for the declaration of a state of emergency? Because according to them, it is not outrightly spelled out that way in the Constitution.
Look, you know, that is just completely disingenuous. Now, if that is not enough, were we to wait for the destruction of the entire national assets that are located in River State? Is that what they're suggesting? I mean, at what point do you draw the line? Were we to say, okay, look, let's wait until everything that's associated with, you know, the production and, you know, export of our crude oil in River State is completely destroyed? What exactly is the tipping point, according to them? You see, look, these are all just very mischievous, you know, arguments. They don't hold any water. The fact is that the Constitution gives the president the authority. It lies in the president's own thinking, assessment, based on the reports, the totality of the intelligence that's available to the president. This is not a decision that is made, that is to be made by the courts or by, even the legislature, or the National Assembly. No, the Constitution reserves that authority to declare, to make that proclamation of a state of emergency, to the president. He alone has the authority to initiate that action, and then subject to ratification by the National Assembly. And as we saw, the two chambers of the National Assembly, the House of Representatives and the Senate of the Federal Republic, ratified that decision of the president. And today we're not talking about the president's action, we're talking about the totality of what the Constitution intended, which is the combination of the authority of the president and the authority of the National Assembly to make this happen. So we are beyond 48 hours. And that's the reason no one is speaking in any clear manner to impeach that decision, because now the president's action has been validated by the National Assembly. And I think that those who want to argue can argue. But, as far as we're concerned, the president and the National Assembly have acted in the best national interest, for that matter, in the strategic interest of our country.
And we'll come back to that in a minute, because there are those who have also challenged the idea of a voice vote when, at the moment, the country is going through such a very sensitive situation. But with the suspended governor now denying links to any militant group, I mean, if I'm to quote his chief press secretary, Nelson Chukwudi, who said he does not contemplate any such association and has no reason to encourage any criminal elements to undertake action. The suspended governor has also restated his commitment to maintaining peace in River State, emphasizing that governance and development can only thrive in a stable environment. Is this statement after fact? Is this rather too late?
I'm still having this audio problem. They need to manage it, because I can't hear her.
All right. Barrister Moka, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation.
Sometimes it's the story that calls. At other times, the people just want to be heard.
School, I need students, but I need teacher.
Can't continue like this.
Their voices re-echoing through time itself.
We haven't done anything. If the tide is high, everybody run for safety.
Their tears leave a sweet, sour taste for all. Their demands, a familiar call beckoning for change. In our world, no one expects a disaster to happen. But when it does, we'll be there to x-ray all sides, from the east to the west, north and south. Community Forum will examine the oddities and challenges to economic development, as well as issues yearning for government intervention. Watch fresh episodes of Community Forum on Sundays by 9:30 p.m. only on TVC News.
I'm Nifemi Oguntoye, news anchor with TVC News.
My day is usually busy, and it's difficult keeping up with breaking news stories, trending stories, business news, stock exchange, and what have you. But with TVC News on WhatsApp, I'm able to catch up with all the breaking news, real-time updates, and trending stories on the go, right on my phone, no matter where I am. It's quick, easy, and always on. And here you can join us by scanning the QR code or using the link on our X and Instagram. Why wait? Come to the side of news that keeps you ahead. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Voted as the best TV station of the year. TVC News breaks into the core of every event as they happen. Following all nationwide big and impactful stories. We tell the news from every perspective, covering every human angle. I am Veronica, bringing you the news you would want to watch.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program tonight. We're evaluating legal and political dimension to emergency room. My guest tonight is Barrister Felix Morka, APC spokesperson. Barrister Morka, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. So before we went on that break, I wanted to know, I asked you about the now suspended governor of Fubara who has denied links to any militant group. His chief press secretary, Nelson Chukwudu, says he does not contemplate any such association and has no reason to encourage any criminal elements to undertake action. So I asked, is this statement after fact? Is this rather too late?
Well, the governor may have denied any involvement with militants and those who are threatening and, in fact, attacking our national assets. But that's neither here nor there at this point, because the same governor, while he was governor, before the president's intervention, had publicly stated his affinity, his collusion, his complicity with people that he told to be on standby to await his instruction. That's the disturbing reality about this matter. That a governor who was elected, who is a sitting governor, would publicly give off this information that he was in fact working with people, elements who were bent and ready to attack our national assets, saying that he would contact them when the time would come. You see, let me say this, that Section 5, I think it was subsection 3
But Barrister Morka, to be very clear, can you hear me? The governor says, in his words, he mentioned youths of the state. Do you think anyone may have taken that out of context?
It's not about taking anything out of context. I don't think it was coincidental that, at that nick of time, just before the proclamation, we saw that attack on the pipeline, in Rivers State. Look, some may take it as a coincidence, but we haven't seen anything like that, for a long time prior to this moment when, the president was in fact just before that time that this proclamation was issued. You see, look, if he walks like a dog, most likely it is a dog. It doesn't take, any kind of fortuitous, ability to read, the times, to tell when events occur in a sequence that validates a prior, warning by, someone in the position of a sitting governor. And let me be clear that the Constitution, in granting the powers, the executive powers of the state to the governor, makes it clear that that power is not to be exercised in a manner that, disturbs the exercise by the federal, government of its own executive authority. And especially, it also provides that the exercise of the executive powers of the governor or of the state must not be such that endangers, national assets that are located in that state. So when a governor conducts himself, okay, by the way, even aside from his, public statements, exactly what did this governor say or do when this threat became, apparent, that people were threatening, violence in his state? Did he make a public, statement in which he condemned those threats? Did he issue any kind of warning or reprimand or anything to rein in the threat of violence? He didn't. He simply, let it flow. He was standing by and enjoying that whole, exercise of extra-legal, extra-executive authority, in the, boonies, somewhere in the dark. And I think that's where it's disturbing. And let me tell you, everyone knows our country is, this president is trying, working night and day, to bring this country back on a path of economic, growth and sustainable, recovery. Who in this country would, condone anyone threatening or attacking the very source of livelihood for our country, the very source of revenue, the most important critical, lifeline for our country at this time? You see, only those who don't care will think that it's okay for the government to sit back and allow for anybody, whether a governor or others, to attack, these national assets. I don't think so. Now, let me say this before you come back to me. That, when the Constitution grants the president this power to make this kind of proclamation, it is to go in and restore law and order, to go in and address any source of insecurity that threatens the corporate existence of Nigeria or of a state, or for that matter, of our national assets. Now, in the case of Rivers State, the reason people talk about, but does the president have the power to suspend the governor? The reason the governor was suspended, because the governor, Governor Fubara, had become a part of the problem that needed to be solved by the proclamation itself. Because, look, I'm not privy to the security reports that's available to the authorities, but I can, speculate and bet that there must be something in there that suggests that this governor, by his statements, by his actions, by his inaction, had in fact, made himself complicit in the complexity of the problem that the proclamation was seeking to solve. So, keeping him there, he was no longer a reliable, collaborator, if you will, of the national government to solve the problems that the proclamation was seeking to address. So I think that he was not removed by the president. He was simply suspended, meaning that his executive powers under the Constitution were put in abeyance, for the time being, while the federal government tackles the source of the threat and the insecurity and the destabilization of law and order in Rivers State for the time being.
All right, let's take a short break, and when we return, we'll get straight into, we'll continue this conversation, everyone.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate fact from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News, first with breaking news.
Hello, TVC Communications, how can I help?
What makes TVC the right choice for my business?
Excellent question, sir. Let me share some exciting facts with you.
Start your day on TVC Entertainment with Wake Up Nigeria, a family and lifestyle show. Your view empowers women globally
It's your view, let it count.
Entertainment Splash delivers the hottest celebrity trends. On TVC News, we keep you informed with breaking news and in-depth analysis of events shaping the world.
I will continue to speak the truth.
TVC News at 7 and TVC News at 10 p.m. delivers the most important stories of the day. Max FM, your hit music radio station, captivates listeners daily across Lagos and Abuja, making every commute more enjoyable. Adaba 88.9 FM is not left out, as it is the voice of Southwest. And on TVC Digital, we reach to million viewers daily. All together, pulls in over 17 million viewers daily. Contact us on 0707 272 8338 or marketing at tvccommunications.tv. Partner with TVC Communications today. Let's grow together.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Before we go on with our conversation with Barrister Felix Smoker, let's take you to Zamfara State for a documentary on Zamfara health sector, the benefits of declaration of state of emergency on health by Governor Dauda Lawal of Zamfara State. Okay, all right. All right, Barrister Smoker, let's go on with this conversation. I mean, it's a known fact that declaration of emergency rule is not a new development in Nigeria. Former Presidents Olusegun Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan had also taken such steps at different times to quell some brewing madness. But what comes to mind when you hear former President Goodluck Jonathan criticize same action? And according to him, the suspension of Governor Fubara dents Nigeria's image. Are these mere political statements?
Well, yes, that's what it is. Just a partisan political statement that really amounts to nothing. It's just a lot of words that says nothing, really. Because, unfortunately, this is a matter that was, festering for nearly 15 months. And all of the leaders of the People's Democratic Party, President Goodluck Jonathan, former President Goodluck Jonathan, and the PDP governors who have recently found their voice, they were all mute. They were completely, willfully blind and silent, in the face of Governor Fubara's egregious violation of our constitution. They simply just were doing their thing and didn't care how Governor Fubara was completely, undermining democracy in Rivers State by his action to destroy the, House of Assembly and ostracize the lawmakers. They didn't say anything. So, it is simply, I think, hypocritical for them now to come out to start speaking, condemning an action of a president who is well-intentioned and who is acting in accordance with the dictates of our constitution. So, whatever he had to say, he was simply, trying to make headlines. I don't think he meant, any of those things he said that seriously. And nobody, I think, who is watching this situation will take him seriously. Why now? Why now? Why not? This is their party we're talking about. Governor Fubara is a governor of the PDP. All of the things that happen in Rivers State, you would have thought that the elders of the PDP would have intervened, over 15 months. They didn't. But in 2 days of the proclamation by the president, they are all, out speaking. I mean, I think the Nigerians should just ignore and dismiss those voices.
But to be fair on the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, he called for peace at that time. But I do not think his plea holds waters, or anyhow it is. But for the purpose of clarity, how do you compare these declarations to others made in the past by these former leaders? Any similarity? What makes a difference? Some say, oh yes, Obasanjo's example is not a good example. Goodluck Jonathan's action is what is obtainable rather. But justifying both actions, what exactly is the difference?
Look, in 2004, then President Olusegun Obasanjo declared a state of emergency in Plateau State, right? And suspended the governor, Joshua Darie. Later on, the same decision was made in the case of Ekiti State. Now, none of those cases where that state of emergency were declared in Plateau and in Ekiti by the former President Obasanjo, was there anything close to, this level of importance that we have in Rivers State? None of those situations actually even compare. We're talking about the, attack and the threat of, continued attack against Nigeria's critical assets located in Rivers State. Quite apart from the breakdown of law and order, quite apart from the fact that for 15 months we didn't have a government, a functional government, as known to our constitution in that state. On top of all that, you had this clear and present threat against our national resources and ability to produce, crude oil, which is the mainstay of our economy. You see, when you compare, the situation in Rivers State that this president has intervened in is by far more compelling, more justifiable, than anything we had in Plateau and in Ekiti states, where the former PDP president of Olusegun Obasanjo deemed it necessary to declare a state of emergency and suspended, both governors. So, again, this is not to say that, it's not to, it's an extraordinary situation we're dealing with. And I think that the president has a lot of discretion under the Constitution to make this decision to protect our country. If he had withheld action by today, if things had gone, really sour in Rivers State, this same president will be vilified and blamed for inaction. So, either way, the buck stops with him. He has made that decision, and the good news is that our National Assembly, that is a multi-partisan assembly, it's not just an assembly, a National Assembly of APC. It's also a National Assembly of the PDP, of the Labour Party, and maybe, one or two other, smaller parties that, approved the decision of the president. So at this point, I think that, the president's action, nobody should be second-guessing that because it's no longer just the president who acted. The National Assembly has verified that action and approved it by, the required majority of members of the National Assembly.
Let's take another look at, the legal dimension to this matter. Because, one, Nigeria has had many constitutions, but the 1999 Constitution, as amended, is a written supreme law of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. At this point, do we need a constitutional amendment? And I ask because, when people like us question why lawyers are hugely divided on this matter, some say it's basically about testing the law. Despite this, I believe we've come too far with this democratic dispensation for us to be very confused about what our Constitution says. Would you advocate for a constitutional amendment so everyone is clear about what the Constitution says at different times?
Look, I don't think that, there are many reasons we may require to amend our Constitution, and I think it's an ongoing conversation. And, at the National Assembly, the 9th Assembly, now the 10th Assembly, they have, constitutional review committees that are empowered to take memoranda from the public, to suggest amendments to our Constitution. A Constitution is a living document. And yes, review of our Constitution should be something we do when needed. So, no one is against that. But, the provision of Section 305, I think it's as clear as can be. You cannot, in legislating anything, you cannot possibly anticipate every spec of scenario where, specific language can be provided for under the Constitution. The Constitution has never been, promised or offered to be, this, if you will, universally comprehensive, documentation of every possible language and, scenarios and occasions and, whatever it is. That's not the way Constitution is written. Look, those who are familiar with the American Constitution, it's barely, the English people don't have a written Constitution. The Americans have, a very terse Constitution with amendments. Not everything is provided for in letters, in ABC, under the Constitution. However, the law has rules for how constitutions are to be interpreted. For example, in Nigeria, if there is a major health emergency that requires the deployment of the full resources of the federal government, the president may, in those circumstances, declare a state of emergency to intervene. But when you read Section 305, I don't think, it provides for, any sort of declaration of state of emergency, for instance, on public health grounds. I don't think I've seen anything like that. And I stand to be corrected. But, the point I'm making is that there are, situations that may arise where the Constitution itself and the framers of the Constitution have not made specific, provision or language or text. Textual, content of the Constitution is limited, but interpretation can be expansive. And I think that's where people need to just take a deep breath and allow this president to, govern as he's doing and doing, creditably well. And give him that benefit of the doubt, as the Constitution gives to him, to make decisions that are critical, at the right time to, both safeguard our liberties, but also to, protect law and order, or to defeat any threat to the peace and security of the Federal Republic,
and for
or
some
any
Nigerians
part
also,
of the Federal Republic or its access.
Right, and for some Nigerians also questioning the legality of the appointment of an administrator, asking if this decision is backed by our Constitution. How do you react to that? How do you respond to that? Or would you say this is backed by the doctrine of necessity?
No, you don't even need to go shopping for any doctrines of necessity or otherwise. The power vested in the president to issue that proclamation, to determine under Section 305, also provides implicit authority to the president to direct the achievement of the objective that that proclamation was meant to solve. In this case, to restore governance in Rivers State, restore law and order, and to defeat any threat to that state or to any part thereof, or to the national assets located in that state. Those are fundamental justification for that intervention. Now, as a part of that, the president needed to execute the objectives of that proclamation in Rivers State. And as I said earlier, in the judgment of the president, the governor, obviously, by all of his actions and inactions, had made himself complicit in the problem and was no longer a viable, reliable collaborator or partner, with the federal government in solving that problem. A governor who is asking people to await his instructions to engage in acts of violence cannot possibly be relied upon to execute, a program of the federal government seeking to restore law and order, in which he is a complicit, promoter. So, look, and naturally, the president had the authority. If he has the authority to declare a state of emergency, certainly he has the authority to, do everything that is necessary, including appointing, an administrator to help execute that decision on the ground in Rivers State.
And I see that you also commended the National Assembly for the display of patriotism, especially by the opposition caucus. But the issue of how both chambers of the National Assembly arrived at a 2/3 needed to pull a seal on the president's decision has been questioned. Is the Constitution clear on that, on whether or not this can be done through a voice note? It did look like a procedural challenge for the National Assembly. And I'm sure you've also seen Mr. Peter Obi's statement. He says, while a 2/3 majority is crucial, it does not justify bypassing proper procedures and undermining the principles of transparency and accountability. It says the use of a voice vote in such a significant decision not only disregards constitutional requirement, but also erodes public trust in the democratic process. How do you react to such statements?
The statement just is, just a lot of English language that really doesn't touch the core of the issue. The Constitution, yes, requires, a 2/3 majority of Parliament to approve. Now, as for whether or not that decision is made by voice vote or by other method of, collecting votes in Parliament, that is entirely something that is at the, within the authority and the, procedures of the National Assembly. They are the ones who make that decision. All that matters is that, 2/3 of the members were present to make that decision to approve the proclamation by the president. That's all that the Constitution requires. The Constitution did not say that it must not be by voice vote. or that it must be by electronic vote or by any other device. That's not what the Constitution says. It simply requires the action of 2/3 majority. And as far as the National Assembly is concerned, and from all accounts coming out of that proceedings, yes, they met the threshold prescribed by the Constitution. And those who are saying that it must not be by voice vote, they should also cite that provision of the Constitution where the Constitution says, since they want and prefer this literal, casual, almost pedestrian, construction of the Constitution, they should also, tell Nigerians what section of the Constitution, says that a voice vote is, not, a proper procedure for approving or for, conveying the Parliament's own approval of the proclamation. You see, that is not, you can't eat your cake and have it. The National Assembly alone have the authority to declare their procedure at any point in time by which decisions are made. When 2/3 majority of members are present and a voice vote is conducted. Right. Now, I'm quite sure that Peter Obi did not hear any dissent. Even his own, opposition members elected on the platform of his own party, we didn't hear any echoes of anybody saying nay when that question was put to vote. So look, I think that we need to presume, and that's what the law says, quite frankly, when those who are mandated to act in accordance with the authority, the law presumes that they have acted regularly. So the presumption of regularity avails to the president and also the National Assembly. And, people should just, I think, get a perspective.
Because you're still talking about reactions, Barrister Mark, I'm sure you must have, also seen the PDP's position on this. The party says that the emergency rule was politically motivated to weaken the party's control ahead of future elections. Is it fair to say that the PDP had all the opportunities and several chances to de-escalate the situation when it began to fester, but failed? And also, what should a national party like the PDP have done differently in handling that crisis? Was the party truly handicapped because of the weaker factor?
You see, look, that's an interesting question. I think it's an important question as well. The PDP is a political party. Governor Fubara was elected on the platform of the PDP. The members of the House of Assembly were elected on the platform of the PDP. So this is really, properly ought to have, initially at least, been an internal matter for the PDP to mediate and call all of their officials, on the executive side and the legislative side together and intervene to, restore, common sense and get them to do the right thing, for the good of the people of Rivers State. But the PDP didn't do that. They didn't do that. They simply willfully, held back and just floated and coasted along with the crisis that Governor Fubara had initiated. For them now to come out and be issuing these statements and making this commentary, that is just, irresponsible, quite frankly. Because, they have not showed any character, they have not showed any type of leadership, they have not showed any, and these are people who, in a party, who aspire to govern Nigeria. They can't even govern themselves. They allow this matter to completely fester and degenerate to a point where, the Supreme Court, made a clear declaration that they had not been government in Rivers State for 15 months. 15 months out of 4 years of the mandate or the tenure of both the governor and the legislature. No government. And see, you can't wish that away. When that happens, clearly, both the actors involved, the parliament, in the legislature in Rivers State, and the governor, had completely, become dysfunctional. And so the PDP shouldn't be blaming the president for doing what they did not do, what they could not do, what they refused to do, or actually, in my view, are incapable of doing, because, as everyone knows, the PDP has become a shadow of itself as a political party.
All right, Barrister Marka, if you can answer this question in less than 1 minute, I would appreciate. The declaration of the state of emergency is for peace to return to the state, for all parties to sheath their swords and embrace peace. But at the moment, what must all concerned parties do? And when I say concerned parties now, this includes Rivers elders, young, old, stakeholders, and past political leaders who have taken sides and practically factionalized. What must they do at this point to end this political rivalry in the states?
You know, look, the interesting part is that the proclamation by the president, I think, really offers an opportunity for all the actors in Rivers State, both the governor, the House of Assembly members, you know, and the elders and the, you know, the other leaders in the stakeholders in the matter, to now really, you know, take a deep breath and go back to the table to figure out where they lost it and to regain control, to, you know, bring back reason and rational thinking in ordering the affairs of the state. The president has given them an opportunity to do so. And I think that they need to take advantage of that rather than simply spew this, you know, criticism that actually hold no water.
All right, then. Barrister Felix Morka, spokesperson of the ruling All Progressives Congress, thank you so much for your perspectives on politics tonight. We appreciate it as we evaluate the political and legal dimension to emergency rule in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons